Very good morning to everybody. I convey my deep gratitude and welcome all of you for your participation in this two-day international webinar on COVID-19 pandemic, its impact on higher education and future strategies, organized by IQAC of our college, Raja Narendra Lal Khan Women's College, popularly known as Gope College. I express my gratefulness to Professor Alok Buragohain, chairperson of our own governing body, for his valuable time to spare with us as speaker of this webinar. I also express my appreciation for Professor Sanjoy Deshmukh, VC nominated honorable member of our academic council, for agreeing to be a speaker. For this matter, I must thank Professor Ranjan Chakraborty, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Vidyasagar University, for nominating them for our college administration and academics. I also feel happy to mention the name of the other speaker of today's webinar, Dr. Nivedita Goswami, counselor of our college, and thanking her for selecting most relevant subject, that is impact of COVID-19 coping strategies for stress management. Raja Enil Khan Women's College, established with the blessings and initiative of the then Chief Minister of West Bengal, Dr. Bidhan Chandra Roy, in the historical Gope Palace of Dinapur in the year 1957. In the ensuing years, the college has registered significant growth in the areas of teaching and research. The college presently offers 27 subjects at the undergraduate level and 11 subjects at the postgraduate level. Last year, we have received 2 research centers, one for natural science and the other for humanities and social science. At present, we have 3,500 students and 40 research scholars, and we have 200 faculty. However, the present pandemic has caused unforeseen obstacle in our pursuance of conventional teaching, learning activities and research. As our students are mainly of rural background, they normally do not have good internet connection, though they possess laptop or smartphone. We are therefore looking for directions from this learning and experience gathering how best to handle this situation. I am happy to inform you all that there has been an overwhelming response to this webinar with a total of 512 registered participants, faculties, research scholars and students from Assam, Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Karnataka, Kerala are prestigious universities, institutes and colleges, namely Benares Hindu University, Assam Agricultural University, Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences, Gandhi Institute for Technology, All India Institute of Hygiene and Health, Bidhan Chandra Krishi Vishwavidyalaya, Bardwan University, Calcutta University, Kalyani University, Rabindra Bharati University, Amity University, Diamond Harbour Women's University, Sidhu Kanu Vishwa University, Bajaj College of Science, Wardha, Sri Vilavan College of Education, Puducherry, Kokrajhar Government College, Jawaharlal Nehru Rajkiya Mahavidyalaya are being represented in this webinar. I am thankful to everybody who has applied for this, registered themselves for this webinar. Now I request Dr. Rashmi Mukherjee, convener of this webinar, and IQAC Joint Coordinator to coordinate the webinar next session. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Madam. A very good morning to all of you, our distinguished speakers, Professor Alok Kumar Gurugohai, Professor Sanjay Deshmukh, distinguished faculties, learning participants, invited guests, scholars and students. On behalf of IQAC Raja Nauratulla Khan Women's College Autonomous, we would like to welcome you all on the first day of two-day international webinar on COVID-19 pandemic, its impact on higher education and future strategies. We are happy to inform you that a total of 512 participants from various universities, institutes and colleges.
Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I would like to apologize for this technical problem from my side where I could not upload my presentation, and we have lost almost 7 to 8 minutes in this. Nevertheless, I will catch up with time and try to stick to the time allotted to me and would complete my presentation within the time. At the outset, I would like to welcome everybody for this international webinar on impact of post-COVID pandemic on higher education and how do we have future strategies for the same. The Honorable Principal of RNL Khan College, which is an autonomous college of Pandit Vidyasagar University. All the staff members, the members of the organizing committee of this international webinar, all the eminent speakers and eminent delegates from different parts of the world. I would like to welcome all of you on my behalf and on behalf of my university. I would also like to thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Pandit Vidyasagar University for giving me an opportunity to serve as the chairman of the Academic Council of RNL Khan College of this prestigious university. It has been a wonderful experience working with the team of very dedicated teachers in this unique institution of learning. This particular webinar, though, talks about post-COVID scenario in terms of what are the scenario going to be in the post-COVID situation in higher education. We will also like to understand the higher education system of our country, and it is divided in two parts. Number one consists of higher education institutions which are either private universities or deemed universities or institutions which have been given status of a deemed university. The second category is that of the conventional universities, which are more than 800 numbers, and they have large number of affiliated colleges or institutions in which hundreds and thousands of students are getting educated or getting wisdom out of higher education. And therefore, it will be very interesting to note that when we are talking about the post-COVID scenario, the teaching and learning technologies for conventional universities are going to be more challenging than those which are already in the pursuit of adopting new technologies. The major difference is the number of students which are learning in these institutions, which is comparatively much less than the students who are getting educated in conventional universities. And therefore, when we talk about post-COVID scenario, we will have to look into this aspect before we go for further discussion during the next 2 days of our international webinar. Incidentally, today being July 18, I am very happy to share with you that my university and my alma mater, the Mumbai University, is celebrating its 163rd anniversary after its foundation. It was established on 18th of July 1857 as one of the three universities in the same year in India, along with University of Kolkata and the Madras University. Though the Mumbai University was among the three, the first ever institution of higher learning at university stage was University of Kolkata, which was established in April 1857. Mumbai University on 18th of July and the Madras University on 5th of September in the same year. So I would like to share this happiness of my institution celebrating 163 years of its completion of existence, and with the total number of students beyond 800,000 and about 810 affiliated colleges and research institutions. The university is not really ranked among the top 100 institutions all over the country or all over the world, but it is definitely a force to reckon with when we go for higher education within or outside India. It is certainly among the top 100 universities in the country, but we have to go a long way before we make a mark at global level as one of the top 100 institutions. The post-COVID education technologies that I'm going to talk on will involve various aspects, and I will start my presentation while presenting various scenarios in terms of challenges in higher education. Basically, the deciding factors in higher education, whether you take the mode of teaching or the mode of learning, and also imparting formal degrees to the students by conducting evaluation process, or what we call it as examination. There are 5 factors which make a difference with regard to higher education. And these deciding factors, as I have mentioned on this particular slide, are professional credibility, legality, safety and security of students, public acceptability, and finally the administrative feasibility. For the last 4 months, our country is debating on whether to conduct examinations or whether not to conduct examinations and award the degrees to the students based on already conducted examinations in the previous semesters, and also the evaluation that has been done in the final semester of various degrees that the universities are going to offer. And here also these 5 factors are going to be very, very crucial. What we are talking about is role of universities in today's context. It should also be taken into consideration, and we have to keep in mind that as late as in 1956, that is 100 years after the first 3 universities were established in India, the UGC was established, the Universities Grants Commission. And till then, the total number of universities till the year 1956, that is the year of establishment of UGC, the total number of universities in India were only 60. And after that, within the last 70 years or so, less than 70 years, now we have the number of state, central as well as private universities crossing 1000 mark. And that is the kind of pace at which we have grown in terms of number of higher institutions or institutions of higher education. However, if we look at the population of our country with regard to the aspiring age group which would like to go for higher education, it is almost 18 crores. That is the number of the age group of students who aspire after their undergraduation to go for post-graduation. And at that level, we are not in a position to cater to such a large number of students. In fact, only 93% of the undergraduates who pass their examinations and want to aspire for higher education at post-graduation level, they are not in a position to get that education. Only 7% of our students get an opportunity to go for higher education. I mean those 7% out of 100% who graduate in our country. And therefore, 50 years before today, when the number of students or aspiring population and the population of our country as a whole was in a manageable situation, the scenario or the perception about universities was different. And the purpose of creation of universities and the role of universities was defined in three major points, that is creation, preservation and dissemination. Creation by way of creation of knowledge, preservation by way of providing repository of knowledge, and dissemination by way of teaching and publishing knowledge that is imparted at higher education level. In fact, it was expected that the university should show correct path for development of humanity as a whole. However, when we are talking about the scenario and the perception about universities today, the points of role of universities have not changed, that is creation, preservation and dissemination. However, the purpose for which the role was defined 50 years ago has had a paradigm shift. Today, creation is referred to research and innovation, preservation is referred to academic infrastructure, and dissemination of knowledge is referred to perception of students on teaching and learning. Therefore, it is expected that universities should not prepare for the future, but they should be molding the future of students who are getting educated in these centers of higher learning. When we are talking about what are the scenarios with respect to impact of COVID-19 pandemic on higher education with respect to future strategies, how do we really look at the teacher's role? How do we look at the great teachers, whether they think alike? And yes, I feel all the great teachers, they think alike. And what they do is as follows. There are 3 points on which I have tried to look at the teacher's thinking and the perception when they look at their role as teachers. You would be aware that all of us teachers, most of us who are viewers of this presentation, are teachers or researchers or aspiring minds who would like to become teachers in their career. Teaching is the only profession in the world where the great pleasure that we derive out of our profession is the task for which we are paid. That is, we are the only profession in the world where we are paid for learning. If you look at our profession and commitment as a learner and not just as a teacher who imparts knowledge. And therefore, the great teachers, when they look at their role as a teacher, they would like to celebrate their mistakes. I mean by celebration is to share and accept with a big heart the mistakes that they may commit while imparting knowledge and appreciate the differences among students. There is a cohort of students who come from different social background, financial background, and also different aspirations. And therefore, looking at their ability to absorb and ability to share their knowledge, it is very important that we understand these fundamental differences at the level of mindset of students and treat that cohort from a different perspective. Finally, it is also important that when we are talking about the Conference of Sustainable Development at Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the entire humanity was talking about looking at options and the agenda for conservation of the entire human race and the conservation of biological diversity. But ultimately, the human beings, which are only one species out of 1.7 million species on the planet, we are only thinking about our own future, the future of only one species. And therefore, when we are talking about great teachers, they will not look only at imparting knowledge to the cohort that they are interacting at the classroom level, but they would also look at the overall humanity that is likely to be benefited by the knowledge that they are imparting and the wisdom that the students are going to get. And therefore, as Swami Vivekananda had said, the true wisdom lies in getting true knowledge from the universities, which not only build your character, but also stand you or make you stand on a firm footing. Therefore, when we are talking about the learning methodologies at students level, I have tried to focus my presentation on learning techniques at the teachers level. because I feel that the teachers have to be a continued learners. Unless they have that perception, they will not be in a position to give justice to their job for 2-3 decades with the same knowledge that they have acquired at their master's level or a doctorate level. And therefore, this evolutionary process that we expect from the students, it has to start from within, and the teachers have to look at their own evolution. In fact, when we are talking about brain research, which has come a long way with regard to the perception that human beings or human minds have about their entire surroundings as well as about their entire own thinking and development, the principles of brain research, they talk about as follows. The one which does the work does the learning. That is the first principle of brain research. Second one is new learning must be organized to infuse significant ideas. The third principle is new learning must be useful. And the fourth, interference must be reduced. With these four principles, we have to understand that the teachers will have to look at all these four aspects of brain research before even trying to understand the mindset of students in the classroom and develop significantly different ways of education, which will be the solution in the future scenario of higher education. Universities, of course, are beginning to change, and it is even the pre-COVID situation. It has been realized that one has to compete at a global level with the cohort of international students, and we have to equip ourselves and our students with not only the knowledge base but also the skill sets that are required to be succeeded in the outside world. And therefore, we'll have to break the boundaries when we are talking about bringing in the change at the university level. And there are a lot of boundaries that is from within and outside. We will have to break them. Many traditional schools as well as departments, they exist in the university. But of late, if you have seen, like the education in the West or in the West Asia or in the eastern part of the world, these boundaries of compartmentalization of departments, they have already been broken in the developed world. But here we are still going or toying with the idea of faculty like law or science or arts or commerce, and we are not in a position to provide, in true sense of the term, the choice-based credit system. Though we have been advocating it, we have been practicing it to a certain extent, but in toto, we are not in a position to offer that kind of education where the boundaries within the faculty are diluted and student is exposed to a true opportunity of looking at different aspects of different faculty which offer knowledge. The outside knowledge, I mean, is the department. Basically, they have to work outside their own domain, and they'll have to work with industries to create opportunities for the students in the term of making them stand on their own feet. It is very interesting, this particular quote which I have taken from one of the speeches of the then President of the United States of America, who in 1862, while addressing a meeting of the Congress, had said, and I quote, "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, we must think anew and also act anew. We must disenthral ourselves, and then we shall save our country." In fact, this particular statement made by Abraham Lincoln as earlier in 1862 stands valid even in today's condition, where we are all engrossed or we are facing the challenges of COVID-19 all over the world. And therefore, what we need today is to bring in learning revolution. And it has to be a revolution, not just evolution. What we take for granted, as I would like to look at problems in higher education of today, is that we are looking at education as it's an idea of linearity, like a watch that you're wearing. If you look at the population which is below the age of 25, essentially the population which is basically going for higher education in universities, 90% of the students of that age group do not wear a watch. And if you ask them a question, they will say that it only gives you time. And what is the use of looking at one instrument and carrying that throughout the day, which can give you only one function? Therefore, if we look at the life, which is not linear, it is organic. And if you look at the organic aspect of life, then this linearity in education has to get dissolved, and we have to overcome this problem. And we have to look at conformity. That is, we have to look at the entire education system, not on the model of fast food. If you go to a fast food or a chain of restaurants like McDonald's or Subway or even Kentucky Chicken, then we have tailor-made items which are available for consumption. And we cannot build our education the way we have built it so far based on conformity. We'll have to really look at in an organic manner. And therefore, when we are talking about challenges to revolution, as I said, it is not evolution. The major challenge for us to understand the revolution of education will be to understand the fundamental aspect of revolution, and we'll have to innovate fundamentally. We cannot consider innovation as easy to achieve. We'll have to really provide lots of opportunities for students to understand what they perceive by way of innovating things. And therefore, if I may say so, transformation is nothing but turning off common sense. Our problem is that in today's scenario, the dream of any other teacher like us is to see how many times they are watched on videos if they are imparting education online. That is what is expected in today's situation. And it could be one of the alternatives, but not the 100% alternative to higher education that we are imparting today. And therefore, how many hits they have on their videos, how many times they have been watched, is not the criteria upon which we will have to look at our own future. And therefore, when we are talking about the situation where the challenges of revolution are discussed, then we have to understand that we have dislocated through education many people from their natural talents. Students are just skill set, and they have been examined or evaluated on the same syllabus that we teach in the classroom. We have forgotten that human resources are very deep, like natural resources, and as deep as any mineral that you have to extract from the mining areas. So we'll have to explore the human resource with much effort. And therefore, when we are talking about the reforms in higher education, we will have to look at reforming the every education system. Reform that we are talking about currently is of no use to anybody in today's concept. And therefore, we will have to look at reforms from the point of view of innovation. In today's context, the reforms have become like improving broken model. So what we will have to look at also, in addition to what I have mentioned earlier, there are lots of misconceptions about higher education. In one of the European countries, and I would not like to name the nation, the policy statement by the government in that particular country had reiterated or stressed the fact that college begins at kindergarten. In fact, it was a complete misconception that all of us will agree, because what it meant by that, you have to identify a proper kindergarten school for your ward to be admitted. Only then you will be in a position to take him to a higher level in the most competent manner. But what is happening is, education in today's context, the way it is imparted, is depleting our physical energies, like fast food that I have mentioned, which is depleting our physical bodies. And therefore, you will have to look at restaurants or the options in our curricula where the things are customized to local circumstances. And that is what is happening in some of the countries within India and largely outside India, where people are looking at handshake between the industries and the academia, so that a better education can be imparted. The example of this misconception is, as I mentioned, that getting into college is the only way that the higher education can be imparted and a student can get a wisdom. In fact, we are forgetting that the human communities have to depend upon a diversity of talent and not a single conception of ability. I remember I came across one person whom I met about 6 months ago, and incidentally, he was one of my students, and he told me that, sir, I am working in fire brigade, but when I was talking about my aspiration to become a fire brigade expert at the school level, none of my teachers were toying with the idea that I should think about that, and they were only trying to tell me that I am thinking completely wrongly and I should be aspiring to become a scientist or an engineer or a doctor or an advocate so that I can make a big mark in the society. However, he told me that, sir, you were one of the few teachers who encouraged me to pursue what I was planning to do. And sure enough, after graduation, I became one where I'm doing my job very well. And he mentioned that a few months back, there was an accident where the fire brigade was called to rescue the people because it was an accident of vehicles, but it caught fire. And when he went to rescue the people there, he rescued one couple, and incidentally, the person who he rescued along with his wife was his school teacher. And after revealing his identity, the school teacher was very, very grateful to him and told him, I'm very proud of you, my child, and I'm very happy that you have done a good job by getting into this profession. And that student was telling me, sir, what should I say now that after saving the life of my teacher, the teacher felt that my profession is as important as the profession of a doctor or an engineer. So these are some of the misconceptions that we are living with. And therefore, when we are talking about paradigm shift in our teaching and learning processes, as I mentioned, we will have to have learning revolution at the teacher's level and not at the level of students with respect to imparting education. I want to give just one example in my presentation, that of National University of Singapore, which has been working tirelessly for the last 2 decades. We have been talking about post-COVID scenario only because it has erupted just 4 months ago. But the universities which have vision for the students' future, they plan ahead of time. And the University of Singapore has thought ahead of time about 2 decades ago, where the intake of students also has been categorized. And what they do is they have a diversity of backgrounds with which they choose students, and they prepare them for constructive failure. They would like to imbibe within them that failure is not the loss of anything. Failure is basically the beginning of learning some things from your mistakes. And therefore they train the students in a manner where they develop the ability of their students to take risks, to strengthen their own path. Also the social entrepreneurship, the background of the student, if he is coming from a social background, whether he can impart his knowledge for uplifting the livelihood security of the rural communities, whether he can do something in that by way of innovation. And also they have been identifying about 300 students from the total 7,000 students they choose for this purpose. They send them to the United States of America. They have a tie-up with Silicon Valley, and there are 10 branches in different parts of the world. That is 3 in North America, 3 in Europe, 1 in Israel, 2 in China, and 1 in Indonesia. They have another program which they call it as entrepreneurship program. And this program, though has been developed for 7,000 students, about 2,400 students from this 7,000, they are sent abroad each year to undertake a different kind of program or internship, and they have an internship with startup companies. Interestingly, the daytime of this internship is spent in these startup companies, and in the second shift, they encourage the students to undergo technopreneurship with partner university. And the National University of Singapore has a partner in the Stanford University for the second shift entrepreneurship or second shift internship of students. So what is the message for our teachers from these kind of innovations that are already been undertaken at universities like the National University of Singapore? Are we really going to look at ourselves as teachers to undergo this revolution Are we really going to look at ourselves as those who will be a constant learner rather than depending on our knowledge that we have acquired in the universities from where we have passed out maybe a few decades ago? And therefore, we will have to understand that the success in life would only emerge from three principles. That is, we'll have to stay put as lifelong learners. The advice that we always try to give to our students, but we forget that we have to be also lifelong learners. Only then we'll be able to impart our knowledge in an evolved manner. We will have to go back to universities at some point of time. In fact, we have sabbaticals for teachers, and we must make best use of these sabbaticals to learn some of the relevant things that we may not have learned when we were undergraduates or postgraduates, and also those which have emerged during the last few decades as things which we have no opportunity to learn. Therefore, we can go back to universities to learn these things, and we can opt for programs where we can go back and upgrade our skills. In fact, the role of universities, as I have always envisaged, in fact, I had a privilege to lead my university as a vice chancellor, and I used to always mention that universities should be looked upon as wetlands. We have enormous number of wetlands in our country, particularly West Bengal. The entire population is aware about the role and importance of wetlands. How the birds flock to the wetlands at some part of the year. These are the migratory birds which come back to the wetlands each and every year and stay there for a while, survive there, and again go back to a different country or their country of origin. In the same manner, university should not be looked upon as a shopping mall where we can purchase something and go back. You should be looking at them or develop them as wetlands where your own students, including yourselves, should go back there once in a while and learn something which you have not learned in the past. And therefore, you develop them as wetlands and not nests for young minds to learn, take off, and they would never return. It should not be in that way. What are the essential skill sets that all of us teachers should be learning? Because I'm trying to focus upon the teachers learning rather than students learning. Everybody has been talking how the students should be learning in the post-COVID scenario, how the technology should be developed for making students understand what knowledge is. But here I'm trying to understand how the mindset of teachers should be, how the teachers should be learners. And that's why I have identified these 5 C's that we should always keep in mind. The first is choice. That is, we have many learning options available for students to learn. Similarly, we should be able to give them more options outside the classroom, which will have relevance to the syllabi, and also an opportunity for the students to learn something as the first-hand experience in the field level. We should allow students, including ourselves, to collaborate with each other and learn as a team. In fact, unless we have a teamwork, we will not be in a position to understand and develop critical thinking and also the problem solving techniques. We will have to look at our own roles, not as a delivery person, but also as a mentor or as a guide who can assist students in their learning process. A communication also is a good way by which you can encourage teamwork, which will lead to communication. Critical thinking, of course, unless you impart knowledge in a proper manner, the student will not be in a position to ask questions. And your success will depend on how many questions students are asking. In fact, we get irritated if students start asking questions, and particularly when we probably may not know the answer of some of those critical questions. So you'll have to look at this particular way of asking questions by students as a success of your imparting knowledge and a way to evaluate yourself as to how you have been able to penetrate that particular curtain and enter into the thinking process of the student. Creativity, of course, will be basically a human satisfying activity. Unless we encourage students to have creative thinking, they will not be able to apply the knowledge that they have gained to gain wisdom. Above all, these 5 points that I have mentioned, we will also look at teachers being caring. they would definitely like students to understand what they're teaching. But what is happening in this process is that they are probably not in a position to understand the mindset of students. And instead of understanding that, they keep on stressing the fact that what they have taught is the last word. Instead of that, they have to understand, and over a period of time, they would have understood, like all of us have understood, that the students will never remember what you did in the classroom or what you taught in the classroom. What they will remember is how you behaved with them, how you tried to understand their problems, and how you tried to provide them and stand by them as a solid rock in their difficult times. And therefore, if you want to make our universities sustainable in future, in the immediate future of post-COVID scenario, then we will have to look at the points that I have mentioned here. We will have to involve industries to design syllabi that would have both fundamental education and research, which is the key component of university curricula. We will have to imbibe critical thinking among students that I mentioned. We will have to have a paradigm shift about attitudes of teachers, which always depended on inform, influence, and inspire philosophy. Here, in the post-COVID and in the current scenario, where we have to look at students as your partners in the process of learning, because you are also learning while imparting education, you will have to entirely reverse this process of inform, influence, and inspire to inspire, influence, and then inform the students who will be able to appreciate your efforts from the point of view of learner's perspective. So this particular slide, which I am trying to make my concluding remarks, the creation of graduates who can cater to the needs of companies should be the primary objective of higher education centers of learning. Because unless they provide opportunities of students to apply their knowledge for their own livelihood security, the education will have no meaning. We will also have to have computational thinking as a part of the curricula, such as the artificial intelligence, as a part of non-technical course. It can be an optional course or a credit that can be accrued by students. We'll also have to imbibe lifelong learning philosophy in the higher education scenario, as I mentioned earlier, by acquiring knowledge, upgrading knowledge, and continuing to evolve ourselves as teachers. Finally, I would like to mention that having said all this, it is not easy for us to change the mindset at the policy level in immediate future. However, what is very important is that we'll have to develop the political will to have these changes slowly and gradually percolating in our higher education system. But if the change has to take place, it has to have a political will, and that is applicable in every sphere of life. Therefore, while concluding, I would like to mention that the real happiness among the students, among the young generation of our country and also of the world will arise out of evolution and reforms that we would like to bring about in higher education system. And education is the only future if you are looking at sustenance of human life on this planet. With these words, I would like to conclude my talk of today, and while apologizing for the initial hiccup in terms of uploading the presentation, I would like to thank all the organizers, particularly Principal Dr. Mrs. Laha, for her leadership to this very important institution of learning in the gamut of Vidyasagar University, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the Vidyasagar University, who has been providing every opportunity to the institutions which are under the fold of this university to grow, to learn, and to share their knowledge for betterment of society. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was a mind-opening concepts which we learned from your presentation, as well as in the simple language that you made us understand. Participants have given certain questions which we would like to discuss with you, sir, if you may permit, sir.
Sure. Definitely. Please go ahead.
One question is regarding how much effective the online education form, which has just been cropped up in our country as an effect of COVID-19, been for students as per statistics or as per numbers?
Particularly in the current situation, even the pre-COVID scenario, there were lots of opportunities being created for the students who have already graduated or they have already completed their formal education and they have been working for their own livelihoods. People were toying with the idea of introducing the online programs, 100% online programs at the management level and also at the technological level. However, in the current situation and the post-COVID scenario, however, online education is promoted as a very, very useful in terms of technology transfer and the knowledge dissemination. I personally feel that the chalk and board method or the face-to-face method of education, imparting knowledge, is not going to diminish. It is not going to diminish the importance of this kind of face-to-face knowledge. And therefore, even the teachers who have certain amount of anxiety within their minds as to whether the online education is going to replace teachers of the future. I personally feel that even if you want to have online education in the current scenario or in the post-COVID scenario, it has to be blending face-to-face education with the online education. And probably maximum up to 40% syllabus, even in the technology faculty, will be feasible for online education. For remaining part or remaining percentage, you will have to have contact with the teachers and students, particularly the classroom teaching or learning in the workshops or in the laboratories.
Okay, sir. The next question is regarding subjects like mathematics or digital signal processing, how to go about them using the online mode, since interaction with the students is a big facet of these subjects like mathematics, digital signal processing.
Yeah. In fact, the answer that I've given for the first question is applicable to this question as well, because I'm not talking about only technology faculty, but the subjects where you have to have interaction with teachers at one-to-one level. This particular mechanism of 40-60 model for developing curricula of students of the future is going to be more relevant rather than thinking about imparting entire education 100% online, which is not feasible in some of these subjects like mathematics, as you mentioned.
So the next question is regarding how will students from very remote or social economic background be able to adopt the methods for online study or exams, because they don't have the infrastructure available there, and the institutes or the colleges or the university also, due to fund crisis or resource minimize, they also can't provide that helping aid to those students.
Well, we are looking at the scenario which is going to last forever, which is not going to happen that way. The COVID situation is going to be subsided over a period of time. However, the methodologies of learning and teaching as well as imparting knowledge are going to be in the form of reforms which we will have to undertake at this point of time. And these reforms are not looking at a COVID-like situation where you are going to be at home and just going to admit yourself in the university and the knowledge is going to be imparted online. We are talking about a scenario which will be sustainable for the future of students. And even in the rural areas, you may agree that there is a cable network, there is a satellite-based communication devices or a cable network for television. As you will agree that the mobiles have reached every nook and corner of our country. And probably it is in a lighter vein, but the fact is that there are more number of mobiles in our country than the number of toilets. So we are really looking at various other aspects which are not really very, very essential for our survival and evolution. And we are looking at certain devices only for pleasure. But these devices also can be used for a better use by way of connectivity, by way of looking at rural education, and by looking at creating education material. By using these technologies, you can definitely reach the rural masses. It does not mean that you're going to have the evaluation methods also based on online education. We're talking about imparting knowledge and education in a scenario where for some point of time the situation of this kind of pandemic is going to prevail, and students may not be in a position to access the institutions where they are admitted for formal learning. And therefore, from the overall point of view, blending of online education with classroom education is the real solution, for which we will have to bring reforms. The current way in which we are teaching or imparting our education is not going to help, not only in this situation, but in the overall scenario, in the post-COVID era, where the skill sets are going to be the deciding factor for survival of human beings, because that is what is the only thing which is going to give them their bread and butter.
Sir, some questions have been posted by faculties regarding previously in the pre-COVID era, the seminars, the conferences, or the class hours were vital in calculating the API in the UGC guidelines for the CAS. So now, as many of our fraternity are organizing the webinars or attending the webinars, and they are also imparting education through online classes. So will UGC or the competent authorities will come up with some sort of evaluation or point system, or how do the faculties go about that?
If you ask me honestly, there should not be any factor which should worry the teachers or the educators who are formally employed in a government system which is supported by UGC. All the centers of higher learning which are undergoing the current situation have been given guidelines either by the central government with regard to central universities, state government with regards to state universities or the institutions which are affiliated to state universities, and also private or deemed to be universities either at central level or a state level. And therefore, when we are currently doing all our academic activities from home with regard to preparation of teaching material for the students who will be enrolled in the new academic year or the formal semester that will start at any time, or the evaluation that we have already done, the evaluation that we will be doing for the students to declare their final year or final semester results, and also the preparation that we are going to make for teaching the students online till the time they are regularly able to visit the universities or colleges for face-to-face learning. I personally feel that there should not be any problem in terms of calculating the working hours. In fact, the word workload itself is very misnomer. It should be working pleasure, because all of us teachers are deriving pleasure out of the work that we are putting in. And as you will agree that the online programs which are established within India and also outside India, whether they are 2-year full-time programs or postgraduate level programs, if you look at the total number of credits that are offered in those programs, they are almost 1/3 or 1/4 of the number of lectures that the student has to learn. Because for preparation of one lecture online, you will agree that you have to invest at least 4 to 5 hours of your physical time. Forget about the knowledge that you are going to acquire out of reading. I'm talking about your own knowledge, your own syllabus that you are teaching at a face-to-face level. If you have to convert that into an online lecture, you require at least 5 to 6 hours to prepare entirely for delivering knowledge for that 1 hour of lecture. And therefore, the norms for calculating workload also will change from the time that we will look at blending of online education with the face-to-face education. And there should not be any problem. Attending seminars and conferences are one way by way of which you can enhance your academic index, performance index. But that is not the only way. I am talking about the entire education or the learning method by which the teachers are going to evolve themselves. And therefore, UGC will have their own reorganization of norms for all the teachers and all the institutions or centers of learning.
Okay, sir. The next question is there any effective alternative system replacing the present classroom direct learning system?
According to me, it is very difficult because as of now, if you take the situation of India or the population that is aspirant to go for higher education, as I mentioned during my speech, that 93% of the graduates do not get an opportunity to go for higher education because of lack of infrastructure. And we are talking about alternatives to impart knowledge to the remaining 7% of the population. I would probably envisage a scenario where, beside the centers of higher learning where we impart formal education, I would like to look at the skill set delivery institutions like ITIs, industrial training institutes, which are having a large network in our country, almost one in district level, if not more. In fact, at every city level or a semi-city level at rural setup, we have industrial training institutions. Probably it will be a good idea to bring them under the umbrella of UGC or the regulatory authorities like AICTE, where they will have affiliation of the university, and whatever certificates and diplomas are being imparted by them, they will have a tagline of the university. In other words, the degrees and certificates will be imparted by as university degree and certificate. That will give them not only value addition, but also the skill set that we are talking about to be imparted by formal institutions of learning. We will have a additional ready-made curriculum available for us to join hands with them and create the future knowledge by way of imparting jointly this skill set along with the formal knowledge. And therefore, I do not see any situation where you will have to have alternatives to colleges or universities. Probably we will have to have collaboration of existing institutions and look at those skill sets which are necessary for making the future generation self-sufficient and stand on their own feet.
Sir, the last question which we would like.
Yeah. Yes, please. I'm not able to.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I could not hear anything after you said last question.
Can you hear?
Can you repeat?
Sir, can you hear me now, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So the question is, how will the institutes, colleges or the university improve the opportunities for jobs or placement for the students in this post-pandemic phase?
During my presentation, I had shown
what initiatives can they take?
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you, sir.
During my presentation, I had shown a particular example of National University of Singapore, who for the last 2 decades have been trying to ensure that the students who enroll in their university will get an opportunity to make a mark not only in society but also in a formal way. They will get an opportunity to get a job. And therefore, the syllabus that we have, which is very conventional, we will have to bring in reforms in reorganizing our syllabi, breaking the walls between the compartments of faculty, join hands with industry and probably develop programs which will help the industry to tell us as to what should be the syllabus of that program, so that the students who undergo that program will have a knowledge which they can directly apply to a particular industry. In Mumbai University, we had developed certain programs, 1 year and 2 year programs with a company called Coca-Cola, where the requirement in their company after the students pass out, they can directly be absorbed because the knowledge that they are going to be getting in the university will be based on the skill sets that are required to take up a job in a company like Coca-Cola. If you take examples of Infosys in India, they have a center in Mysore where they have a induction program. So when they identify students from engineering background, for example, for their as their employees, they have to send these selected candidates for 3 to 6 months just for induction training, so that they can equip them with the knowledge as to how to work in Infosys. So that particular barrier can be dissolved if you are able to work with industries directly to develop the program that will be able to equip the students. When they pass out, they will be able to get a job. job opportunities will depend on the skill set that will be acquired by students, and therefore the choice-based credit system will have to be really strengthened in a more meaningful manner.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a very informative question and answer session. And
thank you very much, Dr. Mukherjee, for your moderation, and I'm very happy that this particular webinar is going to make a difference in the entire approach of not only the participants, but in the post-webinar, the YouTube links that will be available for the viewers will definitely make a better impact of the efforts of your college in area of higher education.
Thank you, sir.